It is Week 18 in the National Football League, and the playoffs are right around the corner. You're watching Picks with David. Thanks for joining me for another edition right here on YouTube and Facebook. And as we look forward to this weekend's games and the finalization of all of the playoff spots, we'll begin with the first game on Saturday. The Chiefs go to Vegas. The 13-3 Kansas City Chiefs at the 6-10 Las Vegas Raiders. Kansas City looking to wrap up the number one seed here in this particular game. They've won 4 straight down the stretch, but some of them have not looked very, convincing, as they have had close games against Denver, close games against the Houston Texans. Now, they did manage to wail on the Seahawks, but that was at home at Arrowhead. They go on the road here against the Raiders, who a couple of years ago, they mollywopped them pretty good, and now the Raiders are starting to play the Chiefs tough again as a result of the different changes they've made offensively. Now, they've made a few changes over the last week or so. Derek Carr is out at quarterback, and in comes Stidham. And he knows the system very well when it comes to Josh McDaniels, as they were together in New England. They still have a great running game in Josh Jacobs. They can get the ball down the field now to a healthy Darren Waller, Devontae Adams. And so I think this is going to be a pretty tight ball game. You know, the Chiefs, like I said, have played decent on offense as they have started to work in their running game in preparation for the playoffs. But unfortunately, the defense has started to fall back as the playoffs have approached. They're not playing as well as they were earlier in about mid-season form. And so I think this is going to be a tight game. While I think Kansas City should win the game, I think the Raiders are really going to make a game of it. But I will take Kansas City to win this game and wrap up the number one seed in the AFC. The second game on Saturday is the 7-9 Tennessee Titans at the 8-8 Jacksonville Jaguars. This game will set the number 4 playoff spot in the AFC, as this is for the division. Tennessee has been the walking wounded over the last several weeks. They lost quarterback Ryan Tannehill. Malik Willis has not played well when it comes to being the quarterback, and so they decide to go off the street here with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. The former Tennessee Volunteer and Pittsburgh Steeler played well against the Dallas Cowboys 10 days ago on the last Thursday night game of the season. And so I expect them to do well here in this particular game against Jacksonville. I don't think that they're going to roll over and just let the Jags win the division. But the Jags roughed up Tennessee a few weeks ago in Tennessee. They had Derrick Henry at that time. Derrick Henry rested this last week in preparation for this game. And so this is for all the marbles in the AFC South. I like the Jacksonville Jaguars in this particular game because they've got a proven coach in Doug Peterson. Trevor Lawrence is really starting to come along here and show why he was the number 1 pick in the draft a couple seasons ago. The running game is doing well with both Travis Etienne and JaMychal Hasty. They've got a few players to throw the ball to in Christian Kirk and Marvin Jones Jr., Evan Ingram at tight end. And so for me, I look at this overall game and I think that it should be Jacksonville winning. Tennessee is going to give them everything they've got, but in the end, I like the Jaguars to win the game and make the playoffs right here on Saturday. Game number 3 is the 10-6 Baltimore Ravens at the 11-4 Cincinnati Bengals. This is the game that gets the monkey wrench thrown in it, because of the tragedy on Monday night with Damar Hamlin. Unfortunately, Baltimore didn't get a chance to win the division should they beat Cincinnati because Cincinnati had a no contest, and they can't catch them in terms of the number of victories for the season. So Cincinnati's already won the division by virtue of the declaration of the no contest, but this is important for playoff seeding. Now, probably no Lamar Jackson again. He's injured, and I'm not even sure he'd be able to participate if this were a playoff game. And we may see these two teams again next week in the first round of the playoffs. But as we look here, Huntley, the quarterback, has tendonitis in his shoulder, and I'm not even sure we're going to see him. So it's going to be ground and pound for the Baltimore Ravens against the high wire act of the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals playing at home are still looking to possibly secure the number 2 seed in the AFC based on the game between Buffalo and New England. And so at this particular time, Cincinnati looks like they should win the game. Does Baltimore's defense have enough to hold Cincinnati down and give their offense a chance, with the ground and pound in order to be able to beat them? I don't think that's going to be the case. So I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bengals to win the game against the Ravens on Sunday. The 5-11 Los Angeles Rams at the 8-8 Seattle Seahawks. This game here is going to help set up the final playoff spot in the NFC. Seattle has to win in order to be able to have the opportunity to get into the playoffs. Between this game and our next game that we're going to talk about, those are the games that matter depending on this final playoff spot. Detroit and Green Bay play each other. If Seattle wins and Green Bay wins, Green Bay gets into the playoff. If Seattle wins and Detroit wins, Seattle gets in the playoff. If Seattle loses and Green Bay wins, Green Bay's in. If Seattle loses and Detroit wins, Detroit gets into the playoffs. And so it's all on Seattle here at the beginning, as the final game will be on Sunday Night Football. Now, the Rams have played decently well with Baker Mayfield as the quarterback. Unfortunately, their defense has completely gone in the toilet. Aaron Donald has been out the last several weeks of the year with nothing to play for. Jalen Ramsey has shut it down. They've got a few other players, on defense that have just decided to sit out and prevent themselves from being injured near the end of the season. Cam Akers has come along at running back for the Rams and is doing what everybody thought he should do at the beginning of the season. I don't know if he was just rusty or hurt, nagging injuries that can happen in the preseason or in the offseason, but he wasn't himself until the last few weeks of the year here. For the Seattle Seahawks, they can run the football. They've got a couple of good young running backs in Kenneth Walker, the rookie, and DJ Dallas in his second year. Of course, they're going to get Tyler Lockett back at wide receiver and pair him with DK Metcalf. So Geno Smith is going to have his full array of weapons, and I expect the Seahawks, with the playoffs on the line, to win the game against the Rams on Sunday. Sunday Night Football on NBC, the 8-8 Detroit Lions, with a chance to make the playoffs, face off with the 8-8 Green Bay Packers. The final playoff spot in the NFC is on the line. The Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football. Now, the Detroit Lions offense has been outstanding throughout this 2022 NFL season. Their defense, not so much. That's the Achilles heel of the team. As for Green Bay, their defense was okay through most of the year, but the offense was missing something. They just couldn't get it in gear for most of the year, but as the end of the year has come up here, they're starting to come along. And it all leads to them running the football. They've got A.J. Dillon, they've got Aaron Jones, and when those two are working in tandem with a good offensive line up front, that sets up the play action passes and the high wire act that can be Aaron Rodgers to his receivers. Now he's got a couple of young players in Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs to pair with Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard. Between all of those receivers, they've started to make progress over the last few weeks and have come out of the basement for a chance to make the playoffs here in this particular game. Now, if the Seattle Seahawks win the game, like we talked about a minute ago, that means Detroit has no chance to win. They can only play spoiler against Green Bay when it comes to making the playoffs. But if Seattle were to lose to the Rams, this game right here is a playoff game. And so when I look at the particular, aspects of the game, I would really like to see the Detroit Lions make the playoffs, but I think their defense is going to let them down as it has much of this season. I just can't see them going into Lambeau in the cold and beating the Packers in a January game where it's on the line for a chance to go to the playoffs. So I'm going to have to take the Green Bay Packers to win this game. Now let's take a look at the NFC playoff picture. And as you can see, the number one seed is still up for grabs. The Philadelphia Eagles need to win their game this particular week in order to clinch the division and that number one seed throughout the NFC playoffs. If they do not win their game, the Dallas Cowboys win their game, Dallas would win the division, but not necessarily the number one seed. San Francisco will have their eyes on the number one seed should Philadelphia falter. Minnesota is pretty much locked in as the third seed at this time. Tampa Bay has clinched the division in the South, and that takes us all the way down to the Giants have made the playoffs, the Cowboys are already in, and it comes down to the Seattle, Green Bay, Detroit scenario. Seattle needs to win to stay alive, but they would need Detroit to beat Green Bay in order to make the playoffs. If Seattle loses, Green Bay and Detroit would be a playoff game. Now let's take a look at the AFC playoff picture. Kansas City has a chance to wrap up the number one seed because of the Buffalo Bills-Cincinnati game being declared a no contest. They'll need to win in Vegas in order to do that. Now, if they were to lose, Buffalo would then have that opportunity to beat New England and take over the number one seed as they should. Cincinnati has already clinched their division because of the no contest. We talked about Jacksonville needing to beat Tennessee. If Tennessee were to beat Jacksonville, they would clinch the division in the AFC South. Baltimore and the Chargers are both in. New England has to beat the Buffalo Bills in order to be in the playoffs. Pittsburgh has an opportunity to make the playoffs as well as the Miami Dolphins do, but it just depends on whether or not New England can beat Buffalo. Now, if Buffalo beats New England, that opens the door for Miami first. They would need to win their game against the New York Jets. Pittsburgh plays against the Cleveland Browns, and so there are scenarios in which Pittsburgh could leapfrog Miami should they not be able to take care of the Jets. So there you have it. There is your playoff scenarios. That's going to do it for me as we wrap up Week 18 here in the NFL Picks with David. Thank you so much for joining me again this week. Be sure to like and subscribe, as the playoff picks will be coming up starting next week, when we'll have 6 games, both 3 on Saturday and 3 on Sunday, to discuss. And until then, thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next week.